Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. Raindrops keep falling on, I've got no rhythm. And today I'm doing a response to a response video. So Paul at Geek Loves Dogs did a book random recommendation, which is one of my favorite things to do, is just talk about books that we've read and randomly recommend them to people. So I'm all down for that. And Steve Donahue, gorgeous Steve Donahue, saw that and made a response which he called Five Alive, and sort of tried to codify it to say that as follows: that you need to either amplify or take one of the books in one of the previous versions of this and either also recommend that or something similar. I've gone with a reasonably tenuous connection. And the other rule he said, which spoke to me, is you have to end with a graphic novel. And I'm all about that as well. So I have here 5 recommendations, starting with one with a tenuous connection to a book that both Paul and Steve recommended, something I read last week, and a graphic novel. Okay, so the first one is both Paul and Steve recommended a book called The Keep, by some Paul Wilson, someone with the surname Wilson. Okay, too spooky and scary to me. One of those, they showed the cover, one of those classic sort of 70s horror novels that I'm never likely to read. But what I do know about The Keep is it was made into a not very good movie by Michael Mann. So what I have is another book that was made into a movie by Michael Mann. That is my connection to the previous recommendations. And the book I'm talking about is The Last of the Mohicans. That is the second in the Leatherstocking novels by James Fenimore Cooper, which I read. I was an English major, I did my degree in English literature, to do it in British English. And one of the books they gave us to read, and this is American literature, I think I did a course in American literature, and they gave us to read over the summer the first of these, The Deerslayer. So while The Last of the Mohicans is probably the best well-known title, we had to read the first one. Once I read the first one, I thought, well, I want to read The Last of the Mohicans, and there's only 3 more to go. And I bought them all. I've got them all in these matching old Penguin Classic editions, and I read my way through all of these. I don't imagine there are very many people reading the entire Leatherstocking novels anymore, but I did, and this was about the time that Michael Mann's version of The Last of the Mohicans was in the cinemas. Starring Daniel Day-Lewis in probably as Hawkeye, and Madeline Stowe, and who else is in it? I can't remember. But this is the one where you stay alive, I will find you, in this weird sort of Irish, North American, I don't know what kind of accent it's supposed to be. I will find you, just stay alive. And that's The Last of the Mohicans. And it's one of the most exciting adventure novels ever. I include Count of Monte Cristo, I include all the classic adventure stories, as well as, just works of classic Victorian literature. Very few of them are quite as exciting. And this has got just tremendously exciting set pieces in it. And all of them do, by the way, all 5 of the in the series do. But The Last of the Mohicans, I think, is the shortest of the 5. And I just remember rattling my way through this. And perhaps in my year of rereading of all of them, this might be the one that I would come back to. I don't imagine it's read very much these days, but I highly recommend The Last of the Mohicans. Next random recommendation. This last week saw the passing of, perhaps, well, I should qualify, after Steve Donahue, the world's most beautiful man. I talk, of course, of Robert Redford, and so I thought I would recommend a book tenuously connected to Robert Redford. He starred in the movie version. The book was originally published as 6 Days of the Condor by James Grady. This is the movie tie-in, because the movie was retitled 3 Days of the Condor. I mean, an amazing movie. Everything, Robert Redford, he's the most mesmerizing, charismatic screen presence of my lifetime, probably. And I'm not sure we'll ever see his like again. The book is a little more retro. I think the movie probably holds up a little bit, but the book's bloody exciting. Good old spy stuff. Works in some secretive agency in an office building somewhere, steps out for lunch. When he comes back, everyone in the office has been killed. What do they know? What secrets were uncovered? Why have they all had to be killed? And he clearly was meant to have been included in that group and has escaped and uses whatever, this was an office spy. This was not a field agent, and uses the knowledge he has and the skills that he has picked up to try and stay alive long enough to find out why his office was targeted and what he can do to get himself off the hook. Really good. I remember when I read the book only in the last 10 years or so. In 2018, I read the book, or maybe early 2019. and I remember saying fights are karate chopped out. It's very sort of that 70s thing. Not perhaps as true to life as the kind of stuff that we see these days. But so I think the movie probably holds up better than the book. But this was bloody exciting. If you like a sort of proper 70s paranoid spy novel, I highly recommend either 6 Days the Condor if you have the pre-movie version, or 3 Days the Condor. I've tried to find it. James Grady did write some sequels to this, and they're very hard to find, and people want a lot of money for them. And this, I think, is just the optimum way. This is a corgi movie tie-in version. They did make also, there was a 2-season show on one of the cable channels called Cont'd. Was it Jeremy Irons' son was in it? No, not Max Irons. Someone was in it, and it sort of went nowhere. But it started off. It was a 10-part. The first season was 10 parts, and it started off with the same premise. Everyone is killed except Condor, and he has to try and talk his way or think his way out of the problem. It was quite good. I don't think I ever stuck around for the second season. Anyway, okay, where do we go from there? Oh, another book that I don't think I've ever spoken about before. I have a whole bunch of these. This is volume 1 of David Mamet's collected plays, and this includes Duck Variations, Sexual Perversity in Chicago, Squirrels, American Buffalo, The Water Engine, Mr. Happiness. Which of these have I ever seen performed? I believe I've seen a version of American Buffalo, but maybe that was a movie version. I remember when it was on in London, I think Al Pacino was in the London cast. I think he'd been in the cast on Broadway or off Broadway, but he came to London. I didn't get to see it. One of the great regrets. I did see him later play Shylock in Peter Hall's Merchant of Venice. So I have seen Al Pacino on stage. The Water Engine, I think, was made into a TV movie, perhaps with William H. Macy. And Sexual Perversity in Chicago, one of Mamet's early plays. That's why I love David Mamet. He may not be a lovable character, but I love his writing, which would variously be described as muscular, in the same way that John Woo's films are always described as balletic. Mamet's writing is always described as muscular, and it is kind of, but he writes dialogue like no one else, overlapping, interrupting, just powerful dialogue. A lot of it in the mouths of men rather than women, but there are occasionally women characters. I've probably seen more individual plays by David Mamet, although not so many from this first collection, but his later career and The Cryptogram, and I've seen a bunch of Race I saw on Broadway. I've seen a few of his plays, but I've read a whole bunch now. I've got plays 2 and plays 3. I have essays that he's written. I've read a whole lot of David Mamet. Let's say these days, not a I've seen movies that he's directed. I think he's a terrific movie director as well. Spanish Prisoner, I particularly recommend. Red Belt is excellent. But as I say, perhaps not the most adorable character these days, but I think the early work holds up. And the reason I chose this one, Plays 1, because it's the first one, but also that play, Sexual Perversity in Chicago, which and when you read these, if you read Mamet's plays, you have to do the voices. So these are things that I've read out loud to myself, playing all the parts, because it has a rhythm and a flow and an Americanism which is so foreign to me as a Brit, that is just, it's delicious in the mouth. And Sexual Perversity in Chicago was made into a movie, famously, and that movie was called About Last Night, starring Rob Lowe, Demi Moore, Jim Belushi, and someone else, Elizabeth Perkins. Anyway, the reason why that's been on my mind is because last week I read this, Hits, Flops and Other Illusions by Ed Zwick. Ed Zwick directed About Last Night, and a whole bunch of other films. The Tom Cruise film, The Last Samurai, directed Glory, which won Denzel Washington his first Best Supporting Actor Oscar, and a whole bunch of other films that he's been involved in. He was originally behind the project Shakespeare in Love before Harvey Weinstein swept in and took it over, and he couldn't get off the ground. He was trying to get it made with Julia Roberts, and that whole story of being in London with Julia Roberts trying to cast Shakespeare opposite her, and then her running out in the middle of the casting and saying no, she doesn't want to do the movie, and it went into limbo for 6 years until it was finally revived with Harvey Weinstein took over the whole thing. But Ed Zwick was the guy who brought Tom Stoppard in to write the screenplay for Shakespeare in Love. Shakespeare in Love is dismissed these days as a trifle. I remember seeing it when it came out and thinking, well, that was bloody good. It was good entertainment. Gwyneth Paltrow famously won an Oscar. She was 26 years old when she won an Oscar and cried in a way which turned a generation of people against her. No reason to. It was a fine performance, and she was emotional. But he writes about, and Ed Zwick won an Oscar as a producer, even though he had been removed from the project 6 years earlier. He was up on stage collecting his Oscar, and just as he was about to give his thank you, Harvey Weinstein steps in front of the mic, and Ed Zwick is left there holding a statue on stage and never gets to say anything. Anyway, that's Hits, Flops, and Other Illusions. This was wonderfully gossipy, and he dishes on all sorts of people. For example, so in that movie Glory, which Denzel Washington won Best Supporting Actor, Morgan Freeman's in it, the late Andre Braugher, as his first movie role, and Matthew Broderick is in it, fresh off Ferris Bueller's Day Off, playing the white commanding officer of this group of black soldiers. And I was not aware of this gossip of what a terrible time they had going up against each other, and Broderick was this big star at the time, and his mother was reviewing and giving notes on the script that was written, and it terribly fractured. And years later, he talked, even as he presents his story, he says that he has since made up with Matthew Broderick and all Water Under the Bridge, but he's deliciously gossipy about things, has nothing but good things to say about Denzel Washington, nothing but good things to say about Tom Cruise, so he kind of knows which side his bread is buttered. But this was, read it in one sitting. It's just fun, it's gossipy. Oh, of course, Ed Zwick famously also was I'm going to say a word now that's going to mean nothing to any of you, was the creator and producer of 30-something. If you've never seen an episode of 30-something, if you don't know what 30-something is, then you're probably at least 20 years younger than me, because that was kind of a big deal. And I was sort of in the zeitgeist in that last throw of network television that everyone watched, a series that loads of think pieces were written about, that everyone was kind of, if you weren't watching it, you kind of knew who everyone was, who was dating who, how Gary was relapsing, and Hope was sort of oddly beautiful but a martyr in her marriage, etc., etc. Anyway, that's all Ed Zwick. This is lots of fun. That is Hits, Flops, and Other Illusions, my 40-something years in Hollywood by Ed Zwick. And we have to end on a graphic novel, and I am going to end on this. I don't know if I've spoken about this before, but this was terrific. This is a giant book. It's called The Fifth Beatle, by the Brian Epstein story, by Vivek J. Tiwari, with art by Andrew Robinson, and then a bit in the middle with art by Kyle Baker. And this is the fairly well-trodden story of Brian Epstein, a Liverpool Jewish man who, a gay Jewish man who had a furniture shop in Liverpool, in the posh part of Liverpool, where in the furniture shop they would also sell records, because they would sell, in those days, a record player came as a piece of furniture. So you would buy, your sideboard would have a record player in it. So along with that, they sold a few records, and people had come in asking for this German band that had played alongside Tony Sheridan on a version of My Bonnie, the famous song My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, which was, the Beatles were backing this. This is before they had a record contract. This is while they were still playing in Hamburg. People were asking this because it turned out they weren't a German band, they were a local Liverpool band. That's why everyone was coming in to ask for the Beatles. And on the back of this, Epstein goes to see these scruffy, sweaty teenagers play in the cavern, and legend has it that he was smitten with these leather-clad scruffs, and decided that he was going to be their manager. And the rest is history, except not a very long history. So that's sort of 61, 62. By 67, Brian Epstein is dead of an accidental overdose, having taken the Beatles to the topmost of the popmost, taken them around the world, and died tragically young. I saw a film recently, I can't remember the name of it, where a bunch of my friends who were all sort of Beatles fanatics, we got together and watched some clips that we hadn't seen before. And there's a recent movie about, I can't remember what it's called, about Brian Epstein's life. And it was kind of sad and melancholy watching it, because it is a tragic story. In many ways, when you look back on history, the whole of the Beatles story is a tragic story. The whole thing lasted 7 years, and after 1970, they never played again. 69. They never played together again by 1980. John is dead in the early, it's now I think with 20 years since we lost George. But Brian Epstein, the first of those great tragedies, the fifth Beatle. This was fun to read, first of all, but also retelling a story that, if that's meaningful to you, I think this is delicately and sensitively told. The Fifth Beatle by Vivek J. Tiwari. And that is my 5 random reads. Thank you to Paul at Geeks Love Dogs, Dogs Love Geeks, Geeks and Dogs doing something together, and the sensitive and gorgeous Steve Donahue. Take care, God bless, bye.